Hello, this is Ken Ferry with this week's Boots in the Field. Harvest is starting to draw down in most places. More and more guys are dragging themselves across the finish line, or at least it feels that way with this year's soybean harvest. Corn yields are staying strong for the most part. Bean yields have definitely continued to soften in that mid-50s, mid-60 range. All fall we've had soybean fields that are really taking a drop in yield, meaning down into the mid to low 40s in some cases. While ones all the way around it or across the road, are yielding back up there in the mid 60s. As we run into this in previous podcasts, I've asked growers that if they hit a field like that that's in the mid 40s and really off the pace, to maybe give us a shout and we come and collect some of those plants and try to figure out what's knocking them out. And we got good response at a number of calls, a number of fields that we've been visiting to look at why are these as much as 20 bushel behind neighboring fields or more. And in those fields, there's some pretty obvious signs, and some of them of sudden death and white mold that you can see when you're out in the field. But for most of them, as we look them over, we have that big tall bean. We got lots of pods, but we got a small bean, which tells us again that this bean was shut down late in the reproductive season, probably in that R5, R6 range. Most of these plants look like they have charcoal rot, which is strange because charcoal rot is a drought kind of driven disease. You're going to see it in a year like 2012. But that's what it looks like. But it also keys out as pod and stem blight, which those are two look-alike diseases, but pod and stem is at the other end. It's a warm, wet disease that you'd work in conditions when typically what we had in August. So the only way to figure out which one of these is the culprit is to take them over to the plant clinic and they'll test them for us and see what's over there. We took over dozens of samples already. Every one of them came back with both charcoal rot and pod and stem. Now, some of them are rated severe to very severe charcoal rot, and some of them are rated severe to very severe pod and stem. But all of them had both diseases. And then from there, it depended on conditions whether they had white mold or not. But those two have come back in every sample that we've sent in. And this is, kind of baffling. It's also why it keys both ways. But the charcoal rot had to get its foothold in this crop from mid-June to early July when we were up against moisture. Remember the 4th of July weekend, we were starting to concern whether we were headed for 2012 drought. That had to bend the foothold for the charcoal rot to get in. The pod and stem was late July to mid-August when it came in. So a situation where it came in on the backside and shut these beans down from the fill itself. Put the two of them together, and they're really putting the bite on some of these fields. Now, what do we do about this for next year? Well, both of these can be transmitted by seed, which is really not important or an issue anymore because we don't bin run beans. We hope the seed company is paying attention to that. But they both do carry over in the residue that's left out here in the fields. And as we take these plants in, they are loaded with both charcoal and pod and stem. So we have a lot of inoculant in those fields. So these fields that have been hit hard should not go back to beans on beans. And I'll get a lot of talk about beans on beans with this market rally. Those are the fields we probably should not, if at all possible, go back to beans on beans, especially if you're no-tilling beans on beans, because all that residue is going to hang around. If you have to, be sure that you're going to get your seed treated, and I would have to at least budget in one foliar application of a fungicide, especially for the pod and stem, to see if we couldn't slow that down a little bit out there itself. But this is, again, it's kind of strange because it'll hit one field and right across the road it won't bother it. So we're definitely dealing with the disease triangle. We looked at a variety plot, and there was a 20-some bushel spread from the top to the bottom. So we took plants from the best hybrid and the worst hybrid and shipped them in. They both came back with pod and stem and charcoal rot, but the one that was 20-some bushel lower in yield came back with very severe pod and stem and severe charcoal rot. So the disease was part of it. And both of these were treated seed. but they weren't sprayed with a fungicide in itself. But that was right in the same plot. So hybrids are going to have big differences here on how they handle pod and stem. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of companies that rate their beans for pod and stem. Again, and it's a cool wet disease itself. The soil testing crews have been reporting some pretty deep ruts in areas, deep enough they can't get across them with their four-wheelers. For you guys that are caught up there, and that's mainly up in the north and east, if you're caught up in there where we got some pretty good ruts going on, I'm going to advise you to do everything you can to get those ruts taken care of this fall. They're just tough to work with in the spring out there itself. So if we can get them filled in, even if you're going out there and spot tilling, but let's get those ruts taken care of this fall, save you a lot of headache itself. Tillage is going full bore just about everywhere. With these recent rains, traction is starting to become an issue. So be careful not to shallow up your tool if you're in a vertical till format. You've got to have complete shatter in that situation itself. Our soil test crews have also reported the sighting of one field that's getting gas put on it. So being applied out there in the field itself. It wasn't a crop tech customer, so that's a good thing. But guys, these soils are too warm to be putting anhydrous on. So hold the line there. It'll cool down. Just be patient in itself. Keep calling in those fields as you get them harvested. The crews are doing a good job of mopping up behind, and we want to keep that going. And with that, keep her safe, keep her rolling.